many other...
This is right, Arab.
Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast from Washington, D.C. I'm Simon Marks, and in the next 30 minutes, I'll be bringing you updates on stories developing all over the world. Our top story tonight, US President Joe Biden is all set for a crackdown on people he calls the merchants of death. President Biden has laid out measures to deal with America's gun crime crisis. We'll get you all the details on that. But first, let's take a look at all the headlines. German Chancellor Angela Merkel calls on the European Union to seek direct talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The Kremlin responds by saying that Putin is a supporter of increased EU-Russia dialogue. The Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban defends the country's controversial LGBT law at the EU summit. Orban refuses to withdraw the legislation and says it's not about homosexuality, but the rights of children and their parents. Following the closure of the pro-democracy newspaper Apple Daily in Hong Kong, Beijing says freedom of the press is not a card of impunity and that there is no extra legal right for being anti-China. Sri Lanka's president pardons 16 men linked to the Tamil Tiger rebels as the country faces renewed pressure from the UN over detentions without charge under an anti-terrorism law. A Greek priest accused of drug trafficking attacks 7 bishops, throwing acid in their faces during a disciplinary hearing. Police say the 37-year-old priest has now been arrested. And the pop singer Britney Spears urges a US judge to end the controversial guardianship that has allowed her father to control her affairs for the last 13 years. In the wake of rising numbers of crimes across the United States that involve the use of firearms, US President Joe Biden is taking action that he says is designed to combat the crisis. The crime rate has risen over the last 18 months across the United States as it grappled with the coronavirus pandemic. Major American cities have been witnessing alarming spikes in shootings, homicides and armed robberies. And now the US president has unveiled his strategy to stem the tide. The plan aims to reduce the easy trade in firearms used to commit violence. President Biden has signaled that the authorities will crack down on what he called merchants of death, who supply the bulk of weapons used in violent crimes.
Today, the department is announcing, as I just did, a major crackdown on stem the flow of guns used to commit violent crimes. It's zero tolerance for gun dealers who willfully violate key existing laws and regulations. Let me repeat, zero tolerance.
The announcement follows a meeting with a bipartisan group of city mayors and law enforcement leaders and Attorney General Merrick Garland. The new measures enable jurisdictions to reallocate unspent COVID-19 recovery funds. Those funds can be used now for new police hires, crime-fighting technology like gunshot detection systems, and expanded efforts to prosecute gun traffickers.
Background checks for purchasing a firearm are important. Ban on assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. No one needs to have a weapon that can fire over 30, 40, 50, even up to 100 rounds. unless you think the deer are wearing Kevlar vests or something.
9 out of every 10 illegal guns found at crime scenes were sold by just 5% of the nation's gun dealers. Justifying the stricter gun laws, the Biden administration said homicides in the first quarter of 2021 rose by 24% over the same period last year. The president again urged Congress to act on meaningful gun control legislation. Joe Biden has warned Americans that the uptick in violent crimes is likely to carry on into the summer. And in anticipation of those potential summer spikes, the Biden administration says it will collaborate with 15 cities that are committed to using leftover pandemic funding. Those cities include Los Angeles, Atlanta, Baltimore, and right here, Washington, D.C.
Folks, this shouldn't be a red or blue issue. It's an American issue. We're not changing the Constitution. We're enforcing it, being reasonable. We're taking on the bad actors doing bad and dangerous things in our communities and to our country.
Racism, coupled with America's gratuitous gun culture, has created a potent mix to fuel violence against minorities. Gun control activists say government action is long overdue. Now, history, I think we can all agree, is a contested space. The experience of colonialism and the manner in which it is taught in schools and universities is increasingly being debated. In many parts of the United States, there is a growing movement of Republican lawmakers at a local level pushing legislation to ban critical race theory from being a part of the curriculum. What is critical race theory? Our next report gets you all the details.
This was meant to be a routine meeting between parents and school staff to close out the school year. But instead, it ended in pandemonium. Hundreds of parents flooded the auditorium at the school in Washington, D.C., loudly accusing the school and the education board of teaching falsehoods about American history. The parents and activists wanted major changes, if not the complete deletion of topics like settler colonialism, institutional slavery, and race relations in present-day America.
When I heard that teachers and students were having critical race theory shoved down their throats and the young white kids were being told that there was something wrong with them because of the color of their skin, I became very concerned.
My youngest looks very white, so they would look at her and say, "You are an oppressor," probably not knowing that she's actually biracial, based on immutable characteristics, not the content of her character, not any qualities about her other than how she looks. And I don't see how that's productive, I don't see how it's accurate, and I don't see how it's not going to cause society to move further apart.
Eventually, the police had to be called in to break up the meeting. One man who got into a scuffle was arrested. But this is no isolated incident from one school in the United States. Increasingly, Republican states are pushing bills to take critical race theory courses out of the curriculum.
It's time to replace
As a field of study, critical race theory emerged 4 decades ago. It examines the inherent racism in the legal framework, institutions, and policy making in the US. But consider this. States such as Tennessee, Iowa, Florida, and Oklahoma already have laws from discussing the difficult topic of race relations. And more states are mulling on similar such legislations. Parents and activists opposing the field of study claim racism cannot be overcome by teaching about it at school. But brushing an issue under the carpet or looking the other way has never led to any solution ever. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
The US says it will not change its Afghanistan withdrawal timeline, even as violence in the war-torn country rises. The announcement by the White House came 2 days before President Ashraf Ghani and the chair of Afghanistan's High Commission for National Reconciliation, Abdullah, are scheduled to hold talks with US President Joe Biden. The White House says that all US troops will withdraw by September the 11th.
First, I would say that our Department of Defense is overseeing an orderly withdrawal of our troops from Afghanistan, and doing that at a pace that, in their view, will ensure their safety and ensure we are doing it in a way that's effective and in a coordinated manner with the government. I will say that while in general we are seeing elevated attacks on DSF and Afghan government versus a year ago, we have not seen an increase in attacks on our military presence since February 2020.
Meanwhile, hundreds of former Mujahideen held a rally in support of Afghan forces in Kabul. The Mujahideen vowed to fight against the Taliban, saying that they will protect their freedom at any cost.
مجاهدین هستیم در وقت مقابلش استاد شدیم حالا در مقابلش استاد هستیم و نمیمونیمش که یک بلس پیش بده وطن ما و خاک ما حتما نابودش میکنیم.
A similar armed mobilization was seen in Herat province by groups that have vowed to recapture areas held by the Taliban. Fierce fighting has erupted between the Taliban and Afghan forces in at least 3 provinces. The Taliban has even captured a town on the Tajikistan border, forcing security forces and customs workers to flee. In a statement, the Taliban asked Afghan troops to join its ranks and said, and I quote, "We again invite troopers, police, militias and workers standing in enemy ranks to embrace the open arms of the Islamic Emirate. We assure all neighbouring countries of Afghanistan that no problems shall arrive with the arrival of Mujahideen in border regions," unquote. There has been a rise in Taliban attacks as US and NATO forces prepare to exit the country as part of the peace deal negotiated between Washington and the Taliban. Negotiations between the Afghan government and the Taliban in Doha are yet to see a breakthrough. Now, over a year ago, when the COVID-19 pandemic began, what had been a global shortage of pilots witnessed a complete turnaround. With flights grounded, suddenly there was a surplus with more pilots than required. But now, with the world opening up again, the situation in the aviation industry is once again on the turn. As you'll hear in this report, experts say the industry could again soon face a pilot shortage, possibly by 2023 or even earlier.
For airlines across the world, securing a pipeline of new pilots has been a major concern. The root cause of the shortage has varied across regions. In the United States, it's an aging workforce facing mandatory early retirements and fewer pilots exiting the military. United Airlines CEO Scott Kirby told Axios on HBO that America could be headed towards a pilot shortage.
The military produces far fewer pilots today than they did, in the Vietnam and Cold War era.
In China, expanding capacity fast enough is a challenge. In a 2019 Oliver Wyman poll of flight operations leaders, 62% of operators listed a shortage of qualified pilots. With the outbreak of COVID-19, this shortage turned into surplus. A year later, as the world now begins to open up and vaccination rates increase, the circumstances have changed again. Flight operators are witnessing a recovery in passenger growth, but could face a post-pandemic pilot shortage. Since the beginning of the pandemic, with the flight services cut down, costs for the airlines have also mounted. To reduce costs, many operators are trimming cadet programs. Such a cyclical industry has forced pilot candidates to reconsider and to pursue other opportunities. Experts say the pilot surplus will not last, and shortage will re-emerge. No later than 2023, or even earlier. The Oliver Wyman study says 25,000 to 35,000 current and future pilots may choose alternative career paths. The study adds that by 2025, the global gap in demand and supply of pilots could be between 34,000 and 50,000 in extreme scenarios. But signs of shortage of staff can already be seen. American Airlines have cancelled hundreds of flights for at least the next few weeks. The reasons cited are heavy uptick in travel and labor shortages. Delta Airlines had to let go of 1,800 pilots and place 1,700 pilots on inactive status. The airline now plans to hire 1,000 pilots as a part of its efforts to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. In London, British pilots, cabin crew and travel agents protested outside the Parliament, urging politicians to save the summer holiday season by reopening routes abroad or risk destroying tens of thousands of jobs as companies fail. They held banners saying pilots peaking up for travel.
We want the Prime Minister to pay proper attention to what's happening to this vital industry. If he were here next to me now, I'd be saying, number one, sort out your traffic light system. Nobody understands it. Nobody knows why more countries aren't going onto the green list. And secondly, look at the economic damage that's being done to the whole of this sector. My pilots, the cabin crew, everybody else in the sector are in fear of losing their jobs, have had pay cuts, have been on furlough. The sector needs more support.
I'd like them to get us flying again safely. If they can't get us flying again, I'd like to see them looking at extending the furlough scheme for the entire industry, not just the airlines, but the entire travel industry. And with a view to giving out some specific help to individual airlines as they need it. Some of these airlines will need more help than others.
Airlines across the world not only need to be prepared for future pilot shortages, but also need to take immediate measures to help reduce the impact of this shortage. COVID-19 related furloughs and early retirements could create real challenges, even for the biggest airlines. Bureau Report, WION. World is One.
Moving on to Indonesia now, where an influential cleric has been sentenced to 4 years in jail for lying about his COVID-19 test result, which made contact tracing even more difficult. The cleric was detained on December the 13th, and as you'll see in this report, he's now been sentenced to prison.
An Indonesian court jailed hardline Islamic cleric Rizik Shihab on Thursday for 4 years for spreading false information in a YouTube video saying he was healthy despite having tested positive for COVID-19. The verdict comes after an 8-month jail term handed last month to Rizik for breaching coronavirus curbs over several mass events. The judge said Rizik, the spiritual leader of the outlawed Islamic Defenders Front, was guilty of, quote, announcing false information and purposefully causing confusion for the public. Hundreds of Rizik's supporters had gathered outside the East Jakarta court amid heavy police guard. Officers fired tear gas to disperse the crowds, who fought back with rocks and plastic bottles. Shortly after being sentenced, Rizik told the court he rejected its ruling and would contest it. His supporters and legal team say the cases are politically motivated efforts to silence the cleric, who has a large and vocal following in the world's biggest Muslim-majority country. Indonesia passed the 2 million mark in coronavirus cases on Monday, as authorities announced a tightening of restrictions to contain the spread in the world's 4th most populous country.
Now, should you ever find yourself discussing countries with the largest number of amphibian species, Australia would be pretty high on your list. The country has about 240 species of frogs alone. Who knew? And the effects of climate change have not eluded them. A biology professor dubbed the Frog Whisperer claims he has mastered imitating and understanding the various sounds that the frogs make. And he believes that they are trying to send us a message.
Reek, 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 reek. Reek, 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 reek.
This is Michael Mahoney, the man who speaks frog. Professionally a biology professor and conservationist, Michael has mastered the art of imitating and understanding various frog croaks, shrills and whistles. He now fears that these frogs may soon go quiet.
They're telling us that there's something wrong with our environment when an animal that's been around for so long and is so resilient is all of a sudden dropping out. So they live in water, we drink water. We use water, they live in water. If they are dying, then we need to be looking at our habitats and asking what is wrong. So they are a canary in the mine. They're telling us that we are not looking after this planet very well.
Australia is replete with various species of amphibians. The country has 240 species of frogs alone. But climate change, unpredictable weather conditions, water pollution and a host of other environmental issues are now resulting in a loss of habitat of various species of frogs.
In my lifetime, I've seen 7 Australian frogs go extinct that I have seen myself and that no longer exist. I have really, probably the saddest part of my career is that as a young person, not much more than finishing being a student, I discovered a frog, and within 2 years of it being discovered, that frog went extinct. And so very early in my career I became aware of just how vulnerable some of our frogs were.
This has pushed conservationists to find solutions and find them quick. Now scientists are developing a cryopreservation method, which can help them bring frogs back from the edge of extinction. The experts are banking on the genetic material. For better understanding, cryopreservation is the process that helps preserve biological constructs such as cells and tissues by cooling them to extremely low temperatures. And while this method may seem whimsical, it is worth a shot. Bureau Report WION World is One.
After 13 years of silence, the American pop star and songwriter Britney Spears has finally spoken out about her conservatorship. In testimony which her supporters are calling heartbreaking, sickening and bold, Britney Spears argued for her independence. Our next report brings you the details of her rare public virtual appearance in a Los Angeles court.
Britney Spears did not hold back at her virtual testimony on Wednesday, where she spoke out about her father's legal control over her life. The pop star told a Los Angeles judge that she wants the controversial 13-year-long conservatorship to end, adding at one point, quote, "I just want my life back." The hearing was closed to the media, and her testimony was available by audio only. In an emotional statement, the 39-year-old said she believed the conservatorship was abusive, adding, quote, "I'm not here to be anyone's slave. I'm traumatized, I'm not happy, I can't sleep, and I'm so angry and I cry every day." Her remarks marked her first public statements about the court-approved legal arrangement, which was first put in place in 2008 when she suffered a mental health breakdown.
What do we want? Free Britney! What do we want it? Now!
Outside the courthouse, fans gathered in solidarity with Spears, saying her career had been stripped from her under the conservatorship.
We are here to free Britney and shine light on the corruption that happens within conservatorships. We will keep showing up until Britney has full autonomy over her body, career, finances, and family. Woo! Yes!
Los Angeles Superior Court Judge Brenda Penny said a formal petition for the conservatorship's termination needed to be submitted to the court before she could take any action. Penny praised Spears for speaking out, saying, quote, "I just want to commend you again for really stepping forward and stepping out to have your thoughts heard." The former teen phenomenon said she wanted to get married again and have another baby, but she said she's been prevented from removing her birth control device and isn't allowed to go to the doctor, quote, "because they don't want me to have children." Last year, Spears began the legal process to remove her father, Jamie Spears, from handling her personal affairs, ranging from her medical care to her finances. Jamie Spears said in a statement read out by his attorney on Wednesday that he was, quote, "sorry to see his daughter suffer and in so much pain." Details of her mental health issues have never been disclosed, but Spears said on Wednesday that doctors had put her on lithium and that she felt drunk.
Absolutely extraordinary story, that one, that has completely gripped the public's imagination here in the United States. And that is a wrap for this edition of WION Live Broadcast from Washington. I'm going to leave you with these visuals from the Oregon Zoo on America's West Coast, where otters enjoy an ice bath as temperatures in Portland reached 35 degrees Celsius. The mercury is expected to rise as high as 42 degrees Celsius in the coming week. Wherever you are, stay cool and keep watching WION. World is One.
One World Trade Center that is the one where the impact.
The cause of India's freedom for many years.
I, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. America is a constant.